the U.S. has shifted into a new era of energy generation. But our current energy infrastructure and regulatory approaches were made for a different time. Let's take a look at what's going on with the U.S. energy system in order to understand the barriers created by the existing infrastructure and regulatory issues. The composition of electricity sources is rapidly changing. From 2011 to 2022, net generation from coal fell 48%. At the same time, the portion of generation coming from wind, hydropower, solar, and other renewables nearly doubled. Natural gas became the United States' largest source of energy. The U.S. has evolved rapidly from being a large net importer of energy just 20 years ago to now being a net exporter. Still, because oil and gas are priced globally, continued dependence on fossil fuels leaves the nation's economy vulnerable to global shifts in supply and demand. Total energy consumed in the residential and commercial sectors outstrips energy consumed in the industrial sector. For the past 20 years, despite increased technology use, larger homes, and population growth, electricity demand has remained roughly flat. So, the U.S. is increasingly electrifying. It's producing more energy, and it's using greener sources of energy. But many barriers still stand in the way of moving to a zero-carbon electricity system. For one, coal and natural gas facilities generally have higher generation capacity than solar facilities. This map shows operating facilities in the U.S. that use fossil fuels, coal and natural gas are the brown markers, and solar, the green markers. The size of each of these markers illustrates the facility's generation capacity. The more renewable electricity generation is in the mix, the more energy production will vary both by season and by time of day. Electricity storage helps bridge the gap between supply and demand. As renewables become a larger part of our energy system, energy storage will play an even more critical role. Another complicating factor, the U.S. doesn't just have one central electricity grid. The country's electricity system is composed of three main physical systems. These three physical grids operate as systems within which electric energy flows freely along paths of least resistance from where it is generated to where it is consumed. Moving energy between the grids can be challenging, if not impossible. Even moving energy between subregions of the same system requires inflexible processes with high transaction costs. Planning for transmission that crosses boundaries is complex. It often requires multiple approvals, which can be costly and create contradictory regulatory requirements. The grid is also showing its age. As renewables make up a larger share of the electricity mix, it will become increasingly important to overcome these barriers to electric transmission. Quickly getting to net zero requires a dramatic acceleration in clean energy deployment and transmission construction. The passage of historic climate legislation, both the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, could lead to a revolution in clean energy generation in the United States. But that transition will only be successful if we grapple with technical challenges and infrastructure issues inherent to the current energy system.